computer. Okay. Hello, this is Charlie Winterbauer. Welcome to the 2020 Virtual Native Plant Festival. We're going to have our first speaker. Over a 26-year period, Trena McNabb has transformed the tangled mess of a sewer line easement into a vibrant, healthy, native wildflower meadow that is now beginning to look like her original vision. It is one of the first of very few such creations in the Carolinas. She will show photos documenting the progression through the years and seasons and highlight many plants, including a collection of native sunflowers. The talk will include her technique for controlling unwanted plants using a series of homemade tools and eliminating non-natives. She uses the plants she grows in her art by photographing and pressing them. Storytelling is a significant aspect of her work. Each painting is actually a connected series of smaller paintings telling a story that deepens the longer one studies a piece. Areas of the work have been described as a transparent painted collage. The overlays form a kaleidoscope of colors and acrylic paint on canvas as images overlap one another to depict the multiple of flora, fauna, foods, and landscape, all aspects of our precious earth. The work ranges from 32-foot-long multi-canvas, site-specific corporate, hospital, or public art commissions to smaller pieces for private residents. Let's hear from Trena. Go ahead, Trena.
Well, hello, and this is going to be the story of my wildflower meadow. First is the what. When we built our house in 1993, there was an existing sewer easement on the property as you see here. The city came that year with very large equipment and mowed everything down. I met with the city manager and promised if they would stay out, I would keep it mowed. As I started to prepare the surface for seeds, I called it the killing field. I spent one entire year doing nothing but killing the brambles, weeds, the non-natives planted for erosion control, and small trees that were growing in the easement. What the city had done gave me a good beginning for my work. What I didn't realize was the resulting mulch from the city mowing created overlaps which protected the dormant seeds from me, and they came up the second year with a vengeance. My first big mistake was that I should have spent another year killing, but I was eager to plant. I am now still trying to eliminate the Lespedeza and others after 27 years. I read that if I did not plow the field, it would help prevent dormant seeds from sprouting. So I scattered my seeds on the bare ground. I bought wildflower seeds and asked that they not be mixed. That way, I put the expensive seeds at the top of the hill to keep them from any flooding that might occur. This was a section of the first year, 1994. That all changed with the re-emerging of the weeds. A friend of mine shot the next 3 photographs with his drone. You can see one of the paths in this shot. This is the main path. These photos were taken in late August with many of the plants going dormant. That accounts for the lack of green in the aerial views. This is a photograph of me standing on one of my paths with swinate sunflowers blooming all around in yellow. The asters are just beginning to bloom in this photograph. One winter, I decided to work on the paths. I experimented first with covering the path with burlap, which I knew would rot out in 1 year. The next year, I bought indoor-outdoor carpet. They cut it into strips for me, and I lined the paths. The paths were already edged with rocks, so I just tucked the carpet up under the rocks. The meadow slopes down a very steep hill and prone to wash out tiny little rocks, which are dangerous for little old ladies like me to walk on. This photograph was taken in February and shows the experimental burlap. I also transplanted moss from another location on the property to the more level end of both paths. A note about the rocks. This property is so rocky, in order to plant something, I dig out a rock and I have a hole. Some of the rocks became the path's borders. This is what the path looked like the next February, with the carpet installed over the rotting burlap. Carpet was the only thing I could think of that would not wash away in the floods or hard rains. Easily handled and not too heavy. The carpet needs replacing now after 6 years, an inexpensive way to maintain the paths. And now we come to why. One of the benefits of this meadow is that it has given me a focus for my paintings and lots of exercise. I have never been very inspired to exercise with no benefit other than, well, health. I like to see something for my effort. The meadow is my stairmaster. This is my interpretation of the meadow. The next few photographs are the meadow in different seasons. No matter when you visit, it's a totally different kind of beauty, in the spring, summer, fall, or winter. This is the result of Biden tick seeds that I collected from the side of the road. They were in profusion that first year, but since they're annuals, the perennials coming up around them have controlled their abundance. This photograph was taken early in the fall, one of my favorite times in the meadow, asters and sunflowers. The leaves on the trees and the grasses are turning gold and red. And my favorite latest addition to the meadow is the plume grass, which stands 12 and 15 feet tall and just adds the most beautiful vertical element to the view. Seeds were collected on the side of the road, and since then, the city keeps that area mowed down, so I was glad I got them when I did. This is another view of the meadow in the fall. In this photo, the swamp or narrow leaf sunflower is blooming. The swamp sunflower grows very well here, even though it's not a swamp. One of the things that I do when digging something in, I'm going to go back here. The swamp sunflower grows very well here, even though it's not a swamp. There are at least 3 different soil types in the meadow where the light level, dampness, and dryness change due to the way the sun hits the hill. I try to take that into consideration when I plant. Not all of my plantings have been successful. One of the things that I do when digging something in is to use the rocks that come out of the hole to circle on the downside of the plant. I imagine that the rainwater coming down the hill will be stopped for a bit of water to the seedling. Swamp sunflowers make very good cut flowers. Most wildflowers do not last very long in a container. On the coldest day in February, I have the meadow cut back with string trimmers. The original bush hogging was deemed too much trouble because of the many rocks and the hill. And it took longer to trailer and drive the tractor over than it actually took to bush hog. And then one year, the tractor hit a rock and had a flat. The ideal situation would be to burn the meadow in the fall, but since I am in the city limits, it's impossible to get a permit. And then comes winter. After the mowing, the creek freezes and the snow falls. That silence is so special, with tracks of the deer and other wildlife running through the snow, usually to the creek. In the spring, with all the rains, the creek sometimes floods. The flooding does not usually affect the meadow flowers. They're firmly rooted in the ground. It just removes all the debris and leaves, scouring the ground and washing in unwanted seeds. Last year, with the flooding from Hurricane Michael, and again in February this year, we experienced two 500-year floods. I lost a bridge construction, yard furniture, some trees, and a lot of ferns that I had planted by the creek. The two floods washed in at least 18 inches of sand over everything along the creek and pushed in a mountain of rocks. The actual creek is showing white in this photograph in the background. Is this evidence of global weirding? This property was once a part of the Moravian Bethania settlement. They maintained large areas for farming. They kept immaculate records, documenting where the water came to in 50 years, 100 years, and 500-year flood levels. We have had two 500-year floods in less than 2 years, and at least 9 100-year floods in the 27 years that I've been here. I like to contrast the seasons in my paintings. In this one, I've separated the seasons with a path. Native grasses help blend the flowers together. They also shade the ground and help to retain moisture around the roots of the flowers. One year, I observed identical Swinett sunflower plants, both with and without surrounding grass. The plants with grass were much better able to survive a lack of water. Perhaps the grass shades the ground. I do not water the meadow. I only water new seedlings when they go into the ground. This is the common native roadside grass, broom sedge, turning red in the fall. The artistic shapes of the river oats bending and trembling in the breeze is always fun to see. A perennial seed takes 2 years for the plant to bloom. Every gardener I know always says, wait till next year. Everything's going to look great next year. Gardeners have faith that their seeds and seedlings will grow. It's a way to give back to the earth. Just think of planting a tree that takes 200 years to mature. I have purchased bulk seeds in the past and scattered them in the meadow. In my small nursery, I do winter sowing, which also helps me acquire plants. But my favorite is taking seeds from the roadside. When the seeds are ripe, I cut off the tops of the plants and put them onto a large sheet spread out in the van. Then taking up the corners of the sheet and scattering the vegetation on the ground where appropriate. I also do this with my own seed heads. When ripe, put them in a bucket, take them to a new area, and scatter. I have so many curious chipmunks and squirrels that my seedlings are kept in cages. If you're not familiar with winter sowing, this is what it looks like. You put your seeds in the jugs by January, and in June, you have seedlings ready to repot and hold for the next spring. An inexpensive way to have plants aplenty and to share. One of my favorite things is the history of plants from the time the first fern-like plant emerged on the planet. This painting has a centered band of some of the first plant fossils and surrounded by our native plants in seed. The next few photographs are of ironweed, from the gigantean, which grows about 15 feet tall, to the smaller species. They attract butterflies and bees and make a beautiful display in the late summer. Ironweed is a pollinator magnet, bees and butterflies and more. Joe Pye weed is the only plant I protect from the deer. I spritz them lightly with a repellent about once a month from the time they emerge until they seed. Now I have a beautiful stand of them along the damper, semi-shady lower edge of the meadow. I love to see their distinctive leaf shapes on the side of the road. Easy to identify at 60 miles an hour. Midsummer, July is a peak time in the meadow. So many flower varieties are blooming. Daisy fleabane makes a great ground cover for the edge of semi-shady areas, blooming in the late spring. Early in the creation of the meadow, I had trouble covering the ground with green. So I would take old hoses and mark places that were especially bare and concentrate my seeding and planting in those areas. I call them crop circles. My system for planting is to water the new seedlings in at first, and then they're on their own. My whole premise is that wildflowers are wild and accustomed to being on their own. They are not hothouse exotics. Coneflowers were in the batch of bulk seed that I planted that first year. It was such fun. Go out on a beautiful, cool October or November day and fling seeds all around, scattering them on the top of the ground. Seeds need to be sown during the winter months to allow them to set in the soil and germinate. I still have those coneflowers, even though other more aggressive plants have taken root. The coneflowers have moved around in the meadow. This is the more common, underappreciated yet beautiful goldenrod from the roadsides. Another pollinator magnet and not a source of pollen that aggravates allergies that some might claim. Butterfly weed has always been a favorite of mine, the roadsideus version. The most expensive seeds I've ever purchased. It is the most beautiful milkweed, necessary to the monarchs and always exciting to see along the roadsides when traveling or walking in the meadow. This meadow beauty was rescued from the horse farm in the neighborhood. His only stipulation was, don't leave a hole for the horses to step in. Blue Mist, an artist's lament. Someone gave me 5 plants of the federally endangered Swinet's sunflower about 16 years ago. I scattered them around at the top of the meadow, and as they multiplied, I dug up the roots, separated, and scattered them further. Now they are reseeding, and I've been told I have the largest collection of swinate sunflowers on the planet. Swinate starts to bloom mid to late September. Here they are mixing with the ironweed. In this photograph, the swinate is blooming alongside the Georgia aster. The aster blooms from the end of September until the first frost kills it. This pictures the swinate sunflowers with the non-native September aster in the background. One year, I bought a Georgia aster at one of the plant auctions from the North Carolina Native Plant Society. Little did I know that I would get the most beautiful aster in the world. Federally endangered and a treasure. They are also spreading and forming large colonies. I know we all just want to look at pretty pictures, and here is one of mountain mint and ironweed. I was told the mountain mint would be invasive, but I have room for it to spread. At first it wanted to hog the ground, but now it's mixing with other plants in the meadow. What makes my meadow special to me is that it borders the Muddy Creek, which is a major waterway in North Carolina. I wanted to do a painting of the creek, but not in a traditional way. In this painting, it is surrounded by trees and plants that grow both in the shade and in the sun as it is in real life. Cardinal flower grows at the lower edge of the meadow. It took me years to realize that they do not like their roots to be covered in mulch over the winter. It grows well at the bottom of damp edge of the meadow where the occasional floods clear the soil of debris. The ironweed and goldenrod are mixing well here. You can see the plume grass in its early stage of pluming. I collected seeds from the plume grass for years and got nothing until I realized that by the time it has plumed, the seeds are gone. I succeeded by collecting early when the seeds first appeared. Here is the plume grass and the trees just beginning to turn. This is a painting of the meadow in the fall. In this playful version, all the birds are flying south. And now we come to how. My biggest help has been the North Carolina Native Plant Society. First of all, I was told that I was not crazy for trying to create this meadow and control that large an area. And then I was given so many things by the members: seeds, plants, books, encouragement, advice, and more. Gardeners are the most generous people on earth. In the beginning, I had a hard time even comprehending the large area. I would be working, looking down, and suddenly I would be in a totally different area from where I planned to be. This is how I controlled myself and made the sections manageable. I strung lengths of landscaping tape from top to bottom of the meadow, creating sections which I left in place all year. I worked back and forth like mowing, starting at the top of the hill where the sun hits first, me staying in the shade. I would not need to look up to get my bearings. I would come to the tape, turn, and go the other way. The dark stripes are the permanent paths, which also represent the edge of a section. I would start the morning, do 1 or 2 sections, and begin at the next section the following workday. If you want to simplify, there are only 2 things to do in the meadow: kill and plant. I have different tools that I use on different days, whatever I plan to focus. But I have one habit, and that is to keep water in strategic rest spots and a chair so that I don't have to be carrying heavy water bottles around. Periodically, I replenish them, and I have a good place to sit and recharge. This chair is sitting at the top of the hill. Notice the bottle of water sitting in the shade of the chair. My chairs are strategically placed to allow me to fall down into it and rest and drink. My chairs always face the creek. I carry my tools in a little apron that I made specifically to hold the things that I need. And as we go through, I'll show you how I use that apron to help me take care of weeding and also planting. My newest experiment is to carry my tools in a vest. This lightweight version has multiple pockets for my most necessary tools and places on which to hang others. So far, it's still clean. One of my best inventions was an applicator to dispense herbicide to kill, particularly Lespedeza. Some of the invasives cannot be pulled out by hand. The most you can hope to do would be to keep them from seeding. My goal is to kill them. So I mix up an herbicide that does not harm the creek, Aqua Star. Someone gave me a bit of dye to add to the solution, which helps me know where I've been. I pour about 1/4 cup into the jug and begin to paint out the weeds by hitting them on a leaf or 2 with my magic wand. You can use the scissors to cut off any leaves you might have hit accidentally. This old mop handle replaces the original stick and extends to reach further. I have a small bottle with herbicide should I need to put a bit more in the jug. You paint just like you would a wall. Dip the brush in, wipe it on the edge of the jug to prevent dripping, and go for the non-native. I always carry this bucket with me, sometimes over my left arm like a pocketbook, so that I can have hands free to work the dispenser or stop and pull weeds and have a bucket to put them in. I have softened the bucket handle with a padded wrap that you would use on a seat belt that's too tight on your shoulder. I also use a flagging system carried along in my bucket. Red means kill me quick, and you see it by side of Lespedeza here. I always have my bucket when walking with the flags available. The weeds are caught off guard and can be marked for future painting. Blue means water me, take care of me. Yellow means watch me, and what am I? Many weeds are hard to see in a field of green. It's helpful to have them flagged when you see them so that you can remove them later. Some weeds are easy to remove by hand and others will not come out of the ground. My favorite invasive to hate is Asian hawksbeard. They seed at 2 inches and at 4 feet. I start digging them out in February, and by late May, when they're blooming, they're easy to pull out of the ground, but by that time, there are too many to get in a single session. I think this year I may have eliminated most of them by finding and pulling them out through June, but I say that every year. I always wear boots, and I can hold down an undesirable plant, in this case mimosa, growing close to a desirable one, and hit it with the paintbrush. The apron is a big help. I can twist it around to be in front or the back. I can get to my tools easier or have them out of the way. If I'm planning to paint that morning, I will take a refill solution so that I can pour a small amount in the jug. I very seldom spray. Usually 1/4 cup will do the entire meadow. In order to paint, I will need at least 5 hours of no rain following the painting. I have scissors and gardening knife always on the belt if I need to transplant something, and extra gloves in my pockets. Knee pads are a big help if I'm planning to get down and pull weeds or planting. It really saves your back from a lot of bending. I do a lot of crawling around on the ground. My favorite activity is sitting on the ground and working on an area. Not recommended, however, beyond the time chiggers are active. Since I'm an artist, I use an artistic solution to eliminating invasives. In the cool morning, I paint out weeds in the garden, and then in the hot afternoon, I paint them in on my paintings. I also recommend that you stop and just take some time to appreciate what you've done and how far the project has taken you. I can usually spend at least a few minutes doing this before I'm up and pulling just one more weed. Thank you so much for your interest in my meadow. You can visit my website for more information about the garden, the art of pressing plants, and my paintings.